chat, and maybe if I can call out Owen McCarthy, if Owen is there. Owen, how are you?
Mike, doing great today. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you, sir, and thanks so much for joining us. But before I go into the questions that we want to ask you, and I'm just going to give a quick bio and just brief overview so people can get to know you a little bit better. Owen McCarthy, who's with us today, is a digital therapeutics engineer who is also the co-founder and president of the board of directors for MedRhythms Incorporated, which uses sensors, music, and artificial intelligence to build evidence-based neurological interventions to measure and improve walking. He's a vice chair of the University of Maine Board of Visitors and is a co-founder of the UMaine Business Challenge, an annual business pitch competition for UMaine college students. Owen also received his undergraduate degree in biological engineering from the University of Maine and his MBA from Harvard Business School. So thank you so much, Owen, for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule. Could you briefly describe MedRhythms Incorporated? What type of business is it, the product line, and so forth?
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. And thank you everyone for joining me. I see a lot of familiar names out there. At MedRhythms, we're building digital therapeutics products, which are evidence-based software as medical devices that focus on treating neurologic injury or disease and helping people improve their walking. So what does all that mean? We launched actually out of Spalding Rehab in Boston, where my co-founder, who's originally from Maine and was a good friend of mine at the University of Maine, was a clinician that was treating people sort of manually one-on-one with the neuroscience of how rhythm and music can help people recover motor function following stroke or traumatic brain injury or with Parkinson's disease or MS, and was seeing tremendous results, but there's not many people trained like him in the world. And so we decided to say, how do we take what Brian was doing and reach more people? And the answer was to take this software approach where we could replicate his brain, use sensors to measure walking in real time, feed it into a phone, and then change rhythm and music back to someone in this closed loop. And we're taking, different than I was listening to Chris talk about some of the SaaS businesses and things, which he had some great advice, but our pathway is a medical device prescription approach. Need to run it through rigorous clinical trials for the product first, get it through the FDA for an approval prior to starting to sell. So the profile of the company is much different. And to date, we're farthest along in stroke, but we have assets, we have a pivotal trial ongoing with, the top rehab hospitals right now, but we have assets in MS and Parkinson's disease, where we have studies ongoing with the Cleveland Clinic and Johns Hopkins, among some other leading research institutions. So yeah, that's a little bit about the company. Happy to tell you much more as we dive in, Mike.
Yeah, no, that's great. So effectively, the idea came from a co-partner who was actually doing his job every day and just said, "Boy, there's got to be a better way to do that." Is that roughly the case? And also, he had known you through school, and you had a background in that. Is that how it all worked?
Yeah, so Brian, he's originally from West Enfield. I'm originally from Patton, Maine. We both went to the University of Maine together. We were in the same fraternity. We were best friends and roommates in Boston for a number of years. And Brian, he's a very passionate guy and big vision guy. And I was at Harvard Business School at the time, and he literally would call me every week and be like, "Owen, I have a patient, they leave the hospital, they want to continue to get access to what I do. There's no one trained. Like, there's got to be a way to reach more people. Like, is there a way to build a business?" And, I started advising him, and eventually, I found I was spending, even in school, spending all my time thinking about it and working on it. So, we decided, let's start MedRhythms to really answer that question of how do we take Brian's skill sets, where there's only 2,000 people trained like him, and scale that to more people. And we've been on a journey. It has not been a straight line since there. And I see, I think the first person on this call that might have heard this idea is Joe Migliaccio from MTI, who looked at us, I think, like we were crazy about what we're doing, but they were a big backer early on as we started kind of down this path. So I just wanted to make a shout out there.
Yeah, I'll tell you the partners that we have in the state, Joe from Maine Technology Institute, MTI, and I'll tell you, it's really elevated the game here, not only in the state, but also the entrepreneurs like yourself, Owen, and your partner, who've been able to push that out nationwide and also really worldwide. So that's why I've been saying along on this event, we've got the best shot that we've ever had going forward. Let me ask you this one, because your business is really unique. Did you have to partner early on with technology partners or venture capital or angels to get to that next step? Because obviously going through the FDA approval process, either by drug or by device is not easy. So how did that play out for you?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, it requires a fair amount of upfront capital to get through that process. As you note, I think, as I noted, the first backers were the MTI and some of the grant programs and other that the state of Maine had that we're eternally grateful for. And then we went to angel capital money. We actually, early on in the process, met up with and got connected with Jean Hoffman, successful 2-time entrepreneur herself with Putney and Newport Strategies. She joined the board, became an investor, and really, we created a board early on and really helped guide us and keep us going forward. And we've had to subsequently raise I guess there's been 3 rounds of outside capital, and we'll require 1 or 2 more likely to get to the exit velocity that we're going to want. Not exit from the sense of exiting the company, but to get to the point where we're at a profitable stage with our products, et cetera.
When did you know proof of concept? I mean, obviously your partner's seeing it every day on the manual side, but as far as the technology application, when did you know that there was a proof of concept at hand? How long did that take, and what sort of process did you have to go through to get there?
Well, so there's 2 ways to answer that, right? I mean, I think you alluded to the first one. Like, we knew there was a need, like a market need, because of the fact that people were demanding solutions when they left the hospital, and that they wanted to continue to get care, and they would pay for, if you were to hire a therapist, which we tried to do at first actually, and to meet the need. And then we realized that doesn't solve the scale problem that we set out to hit. They pay $100 to $150 out of pocket for an hour, of a session. And so we said, well, we're onto something here, but it's not scalable, and then we said, well, can we build it in technology? And we hired a small team early on to build it out. And our first real instinct that we were like, the technology had translated from an efficacy standpoint, for the intervention to technology, was our feasibility study we ran with Boston University. And they, we saw as results as good, if not better, than some of the live therapy results, and said, we're further onto something here. And that actually just subsequently got published in the top neuro rehab journal, that original data. So that's really helpful. And then, we spent a lot of time interacting with patients as we're working on because there's the 2 parts to what we're building. There's the clinical efficacy, like, does it impact the condition and improve walking speed, et cetera, which is super important for the medical community, for the insurers, for the prescriber. And then there's the, will someone do it in the wild? And so those are parallel questions that we have to answer. And we spent a lot of time working with patients directly on that front. And everyone it's sort of like, what's taking you so long? Why can't we have this now? Like, I want to walk a 5K with my granddaughter, but I can't walk that well. Like, I need this to help out. All these anecdotal stories that lead us to believe that we're onto something there.
That's great insight. And I'm going to jump on that thought. Owen, what is your distribution channel to those eventual customers? I mean, who are the gateways, as it were? Is it through providers and influencers, or is it direct to a consumer, or how do you see that working?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think, you gotta, if you look at our pipeline of products, stroke, MS, Parkinson's disease, it will be slightly different for each of them. So I'm going to focus on stroke because that's farthest along. It is a prescription product, and it will be a prescription product, post the approval. And the prescription needs to come from likely a physical medicine rehab doctor, or a PCP, which is less likely, or someone that can write it that would treat these patients. And so there's a customer there, and we need to get them educated on the intervention, once it's approved, and you need to get them to think it benefits the patients. And then there's another group, right? The patients and caregivers. Actually, a lot of decisions that are made for stroke survivors with deficits are are recommended by either their loved ones or their family caregivers or others that you could do some direct marketing to, but the payers, if you are going to be third-party payers, Medicare, Medicare Advantage, Aetna, et cetera, down the list. And so, our value prop needs to be clinical benefit to prescriber, and doesn't interrupt workflow, benefit to patient in that it improves their lives and maybe their independence or whatever, the product we can claim once approved, and then health savings to insurer. And, we chose to go this route because if you look at the 3.5 million people that have chronic stroke walking deficits, there is probably a lot of them are in our lower socioeconomic status. It disproportionately impacts minorities and others. And so we didn't want to be just a product for rich people. So we said we have to take on the healthcare system. So prescribed, influence, the patients need to use it by the caregivers. And then we need a health economic sort of argument that we need to build up for the insurers.
When you talked about a device, could you describe that a little bit, Owen, to just give people we're going to put your contact information and your website on our post-event website, but just if you could describe that to people here on the call.
Yeah, so it's, the components of the intervention that's being regulated is largely a software part, but it involves a couple of different components. So what you'll get in a kit if you're a stroke survivor would be a pair of foot-worn sensors. And I wish if I would have been prepared, I should have grabbed some, but you can clip on each foot that measure walking in real time. We are actually buying low-end phones and locking them down because syncing Bluetooth for this population is a major challenge. So we are making it so they can't be unsynced, essentially, shipping that with in a kit with the sensors and with a set of headphones. So that's the full kit that someone would get. And then the process that they would use it would be, they would put the sensors on, they would hit the start button on the phone because it's kiosk and there's literally a start button. They would walk for 30 seconds. We'd measure where they're at from a walking standpoint. Then we would start the rhythm and the music at that baseline and then walk them through a clinical program that takes advantage of how it attacks the brain with the rhythmic stimulus to maybe help them walk faster while more on balance for 30 minutes. And they would do it 3 times a week for maybe up to 90 days until they don't see clinical benefit anymore. So that's sort of the product and the process of using it. And it will actually have different iterations for different conditions. For example, the MS product, which is further behind the stroke product, is behind a little bit in development. Likely we'd send them a set of foot-worn sensors. They'd download an app and connect them, and then that program would be there. It just all depends on the user conditions and what is most likely that will fit into their lives.
When you say music, I'm just going to try to take a leap here for a second. Is it a melodic tune or a rhythm that you guys are prescribing, or how does that play out?
So we're going to dive into neuroscience a little bit. The reason it works is because if you hear a strong rhythmic cue in your background, it in your brain activates your auditory system and your motor system simultaneously and subconsciously, and even if you have damage. And so what you can do with that is you could, if you start someone at a baseline where they're at, you can slowly increase it over time as you measure they're safe, or decrease it over time, to drive them towards a clinical goal, as well as layering in some voice cues. And I say all that because most music has rhythm in it. And so we have a patented system that can screen a song, figure out if it has therapeutic values, quote unquote, and be able to use it with the idea that we want to use as much preferred content as possible for someone. And then in real time, we'll shift it faster and slower with some of our software we've built, and we'll add maybe extra rhythm to it if necessary along that line. So we can use a lot of different content, a lot of different songs, and sort of personalize it to that session. But we can't use things like maybe jazz and classical music's really hard because they have weird time signatures and there's not a lot of rhythm and it's all over the place. But a lot of types of content we can bring into the system.
I find this so fascinating, and I'm hoping and I'm crossing my fingers that AC/DC is one of those ones that would work.
Back in Black would work real nice, I think.
'Cause I have a brother-in-law who's a rock and roll person, and he has a little bit of an issue post-stroke. And I'm just really fascinated on a personal level with this, and hope that might be an option. Let me ask you just what's your time frame? What I think, if I understand, I think maybe pharmaceuticals might have to go through a 3-stage FDA approval, or even something a little bit different. What about your own, and where are you on that?
Yeah, so it mirrors more like a medical device pathway than a pharmaceutical pathway, which you're right. There's like kind of 3 phases to their drug trials. In medical device pre-submission, there's usually you do a feasibility to measure sort of, rough effect size, like what you're seeing. And then you do a pivotal study to say, for this claim, marketing claim that you want to make, here's the study that supports it. So we are now in that pivotal study stage. We're about halfway through. COVID has had an impact on that. So it was supposed to be wrapped up by now, but, we've had to add a few more sites, and, it's hard to predict the exact timeline because, it seems like every day the world's unpredictable when things are open and close. So, but let's say that finishes up, it gets submitted to the FDA. Average approval timelines for medical devices are 6 months to a year from that point. So there's still some time to get there, but COVID's the biggest variable and uncertainty. I will say on the flip side, digitally delivering care in home and helping people, recover things like stroke, et cetera, have had actually a lot of positive acceleration due to reimbursement changes during this period of time. And so while it may have delayed some of our development, it's accelerated some of the reimbursement landscape and language for our industry. And ideally we'll be able to, help reach more patients through that change.
What would you say, Owen, is the toughest part of starting the company, or the biggest obstacle that you ran into, or do you think you've not run into it yet?
Oh no, there's plenty of obstacles. I mean, you start a company that, I was, the other day we were going through, I think we have 8 different types of lawyers that we work with regularly, because there's HIPAA, there's music licensing, there's IP, there's clinical trial, so I think we naively didn't realize the complexity of what we were diving into, but I think that helped us keep soldiering on and taking every mountain and seeing another mountain to take in the distance. But yeah, so there's plenty of obstacles, and as I'm sure as I was laying out those different stakeholders, the clinician, the patient caregiver, and the payer, it's really hard to get them all aligned, and so that's also an obstacle, is figuring out how you deliver value to multiple people in this setting. But all in all, I think Brian and I were super passionate about doing this, and we like to work hard, and we don't like to give up. So you got to soldier through some of these obstacles, and got to take the next hill after you've taken this one. So there's plenty to come, and plenty that have come.
If you were to start all over again, Owen, looking backwards, did you see something that was so obvious that you would do something differently, or is there a theme or something now that you look at and say, wow, we should have done something completely differently, or something sooner, or not done something, or stressed or worried over something that just seemed like, now looking back, was immaterial?
I don't know about that. I mean, we've certainly made mistakes, and certainly will continue to make mistakes, and it's about how you respond to them that's important. And if I was to start from ground zero, the macro environment would be a lot different, both in reimbursement and the digital therapeutics, et cetera. So I think if I was to start it now, we would have better blueprints to work off of, and a clearer set of language, and investors would understand more, et cetera. But, I don't know if I went back in time, those things weren't in place. So, I guess I'm not really answering your question, Mike. There's plenty of things I'm sure we could have done differently, but, I'm not sure one jumps out specifically to me.
Yeah, I mean, the important part about it, Owen, obviously you guys stayed agile enough to be able to pivot quickly. And when you were reeling off the amount of different silos that you have to work through, that's not insignificant. And any one of those relative to either just healthcare payers, insurance reimbursement, music alone, right? The music industry relative to what's going on now with copyright. It's just, that's got to be, 10 worlds in itself. And you've got 4 or 5 at the same time going on. So anything that you've learned from all that experience?
No, I just think what, for us, like we always like to know what really good is, like who other companies in the space or other companies, globally that are doing what we're maybe not competitors, but other digital therapeutics companies or others that are excellent and doing things seemingly well. And if we can borrow things from what they've done or jump on board with them as the industry is being built, like I think that's super helpful. The other thing and Brian and I say this all the time, we've had some good progress. We've had some good successes. There's been some like check marks that have been helpful along the way, but we got to remember it's the process over that deliver the outcomes and not the outcomes that deliver the outcomes. And so like, with that, you got to stay true to the hard work and really getting to the root of what's right, et cetera, and not sort of, resting on our laurels. Though I will say, as we built up team, we've had to get better at celebrating the wins because Brian and I tend to just move on. And, like we've had some pretty big milestones we've hit. And so we've had to consciously remind ourselves that while that may work for us, we have a team of, 17 people now that we need to keep, we need to recognize the good work that they've done to get us here and we'll continue to do.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And you're right, not enough do. And, people talk about that element of burnout because there's so much runway ahead of you that you're just not taking the time to celebrate. And any parting advice for someone who is starting out as an entrepreneur that either you got or you wish you had gotten before you started out, Owen, on your own journey?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think I alluded to some of that. Know what you're really good at, like stick to like the process, hard work, perseverance, find advisors early on and people that are, you can learn a lot from other people that have been there, done that in your industry or in your area as fast as possible. And, if you're in a new space, you can actually become an industry insider pretty quickly because there's not many of them. And so, I think take advantage of those areas and, and don't just benchmark yourself against what's across the hall, like benchmark yourself about like against what you want to be globally or nationally or whatever your perspective is. And so those are some of the things that I think, were helpful for me and, I think, and continue to be, there's plenty of other things, but, those are some of the things.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out. And also too, Owen, thank you for recognizing the great work that some of the unsung heroes do in the background at those organizations like MTI and the like, and E2 Tech that Marty runs. And really, because having gotten to know them myself, those individuals you had mentioned in the last decade or so, they're just tirelessly working on behalf of the entrepreneurs here in Maine and also that network. And I just laughed. I think Marty called out and just said, call him the MIG.
Yeah, Joe Miggs. Yeah, that sounds better to me. So,
that's what we say, right? But the work that he and his colleagues have been doing down there and at these other locations, DECD and the like, it's just really amazing. And there are a lot of unsung heroes that are helping push these entrepreneurial ventures forward. And frankly, I would say more so now than ever before. So that's why I'm continually saying this is just a sweet spot, I think, in Maine's history for entrepreneurship. And I'm really excited following of your journey, Owen. I had a chance to be part of a couple of panels along the way when you started. And I'm just amazed how quickly you and your partners have grown this business in a real short period of time. And we're all going to be looking for that success coming forward. And what we'll do is we'll put the company's website in the post-event show notes, Owen. So again, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing that insight. And the best of luck to you and your partners going forward.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you for everyone listening, and look forward to seeing you all about the community, and have a great rest of your Friday.
Yeah, thanks so much, Owen. Much appreciated. Chat